guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you are new. Today is part 3 of I don't know how many of homeschool planning for the 2023-2024 homeschool year. So let's get started. I want to welcome you back and welcome if you are new. My name is Heather. I'm a homeschooling mom of 3 kids, elementary, middle, and high school age. We're finishing up our 12th year homeschooling this year. If you're not subscribed, I would love for you to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you're notified of all of my future videos. And if you are looking for more encouragement and community, group coaching, all of that kind of stuff, I would love for you to check out our Patreon community. I have a link in the description box if you are interested. So today is part 3 of my homeschool planning series. I have the playlist for 2023-2024 homeschool planning in the description box for you. It'll make a lot more sense if you start at the beginning, but don't feel like you need to. If you just want to jump in and see what I'm up to today, that is totally fine. We are going through my end of year wrap-up questions today. I have a free printable for this, which I will also leave in the description box if you want to print out your own and answer the questions. I do this every year. I created this, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, just so that I could figure out how my overall year went and really sit down and flesh out some of the things that went well and some that were not going well. And it definitely helps me as I think about next year, as I think about the resources that I want to use, especially as I think about our rhythm and the type of schedule I want. We are year-round homeschoolers, so we have a lot of flexibility within our year of homeschooling. So I treat a homeschool year as July 1st through June 30th. That's how I've always treated our homeschool year. But because we are year-round homeschoolers, we're able to really make our schedule work for us. We can do so many different things, and we do many different things. But mainly our big thing is that we take a big break from Thanksgiving to New Year's, and we spend the time that we are off our traditional curriculum as more passion project based time, interest led time, working on goals and objectives of things that we want to complete and learn and all of that kind of stuff. So this is a big part of figuring out where I want to go next year. So I'm just going to read through the questions and give you my answers. And if you have questions about anything that I talk about, please leave them in the comments, or you can always email me. My contact form is always in the description box. Okay, so the first question on my wrap-up questions list is, what went well for you this homeschool year? And when I sat down to work on this, I realized that in the fall, so our year started in July last year, and by the time the middle of August rolled around, a lot of my plans that I had for our fall and everything went out the window. Part of that is because Emma decided to run cross country the second week in August. And we hadn't planned on that. And then the first week in September, she decided she wanted to do band at the public school. And so all of the rhythms that I had created, all of that stuff went out the window in the fall. And then when we got to our winter break, we realized that band was not going to work for her, and cross country was over at that point. It ended in October, but she realized that she did not want to continue going back and forth to the public school every other day for band. It was too much out of her day with the transition time, with making sure she was ready, all of that stuff, having transition time margin when she got home so that she could relax a little bit before she got into her other work. It just wasn't great. So we made a big pivot in January, and I have a video about that. So when I was thinking about what went well for us this homeschool year, I was really basing it on the second semester and less about the first semester, because I've already made a bunch of those changes. And see, here's the thing. Last year when I did these questions last year, and I have a video of these questions last year, one of the things that I said in that video was we were not going to do public school activities this year. And I went back on that, and we ended up doing public school activities, and it screwed us over because I did not keep to my yes and no list the way that I knew I ought to. And so it was kind of like, maybe we can make it work. Maybe it won't be that bad. And it wasn't bad. It wasn't that she wasn't enjoying the class. It was that everything else had to fit around the class in these little pockets of time. And that part was not fun because there wasn't enough time to do some of the more exciting things that she wanted to do. She didn't have as much time for her animation. She didn't have as much time for just her running, which she still continues to do because we were back and forth to the school so much. That was my preface for this question. So what went well for you this homeschool year? Language arts and English, those are always great. We love the Sunlight literature. We love the Sunlight language arts, the mechanics portion of language arts. I don't do as many of the writing projects from Sunlight. Sunlight pretty much has a paper a week once you get into the upper levels, and I think that's too much. So we kind of go back and forth between using Brave Writer and Sunlight. This year I was supposed to start Help for High School with Emma, but because of our busy fall, we didn't get to it. And so that's something that we're probably going to work on a little bit this summer. I think that's kind of the direction that we're going. But overall, all of the literature that we read was amazing. The discussions really, really good. It was a little bit harder for Jack with the books that I chose for him. He read most of the books, except I think he cut out maybe 3 in the fall. And so he finished up all of those books in the fall. And then in the spring, he's just been choosing his own books to read. And I think he's read 11 or 12 books in the past couple of months. So I'm pretty happy with that. He read all the Hunger Games books. He read the Survivors series, and there's been a few other books. The Wing Feather Saga. I'm trying to think. I can't remember if there's another couple of books, but anyways, he's really enjoyed that. Lucy did a great job with language arts. She read all of her level 2 books in the fall, except for one, which I think she finished in January. And then she has been doing her copy work every week, and we're working on her stories. So everybody participated in NaNoWriMo in the fall, and even I got on board and completed my 50,000 word goal. It was a lot of fun for me to do that. I haven't done that maybe 6 or 7 years. So participating with my kids this year was a lot of fun. I think Lucy wrote about 2,500 words. Emma did 15,000, and I think Jack did around 10,000. So it was a lot of fun. Other things that went well for us, the passion projects. In the first semester, they did not go well, but the second semester, we readjusted. In the morning is when we do our academic work, math, science, history, English, that kind of stuff. And then in the afternoon, they have time to work on their passion projects. So it has been a little bit hard in the spring semester just because we had to catch up a little bit for Emma with Spanish. The next thing that went really well, homeschool lists. When I give my kids a list on Monday morning of all the work they need to complete in the week, they are really good about systematically going through the list and checking off all of the boxes. It's very helpful for them to have those lists, and then for my older kids to put them in their own planner and to kind of plan out. We're working on like executive function skills and planning and time management and all of that stuff. So that went really well. Our Monday meetings went really well. That's when we go over everything that we have going on in the week. I talk about the big projects or any sort of tests or things that maybe Emma has, or if Jack has something for math. If we're out of the house, any field trips or fun things that we're doing, all of that stuff, library trips. Having that Monday meeting, my kids like to know what's going on. So when we have those meetings, it gives us a chance to sort of chat as well as prepare for the week ahead. The next thing is my monthly reset. And during my monthly reset, I do a whole lot of personal planning and goals and all of that stuff, but I also take the time to work on prepping for the next month of homeschool. And that just is me listing out the books that we are going to be reading, making sure I know where we're at in all of the different subjects, just kind of updating transcripts and grades for Emma, making sure that I just have all of the information compiled that I need to, or if I need to get new supplies, or if the kids have come to me with a new interest that they have, I spend some time looking for classes either on Skillshare or documentaries on CuriosityStream or YouTube videos or whatnot, books. so that they have some fresh resources for that stuff. That's very helpful for me to stay on top of things. The next thing was personal development with Emma and Jack. That's something new that I added this year, and it was something that I added more towards the end of the first semester, beginning of the second semester. We read this 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens, which I definitely recommend. It took us a really long time to get through that book, but the reason was because we were having such good conversation. We would sit down and I would read for maybe 10 minutes, but then we would talk for an hour about the content. So that was really good. And then Emma actually started off the year reading this, Thomas Jefferson Education for Teens, which has some really good book lists and kind of gives you some ideas about how to manage your time, what your priorities ought to be, figuring out how to manage your days, that kind of stuff. I really like that book. I also read it. So having the personal development books with the kids has been really good. We're reading through Life Skills for Teens right now. And then Emma and I will be working through this Finding the Career That Fits You workbook this summer. I have no idea if it's any good or not. I've looked through it a little bit and I think that it will be good. There's like some personality quizzes, some skill quizzes, some different information that way. I think it's going to be good for her to give her a little bit of direction because she wants to be an author, artist, singer, actress, graphic designer at the moment. So we'll see. The next thing that went really well was running for the kids. They all took up running. Emma has been running for a couple of years now, and Jack as well, but they all really started running a lot more, using the treadmill through the winter, going outside when we didn't have snow and ice on the ground, and having that time for them to kind of decompress and just listen to music while they're outside running has been really good. Even Lucy gets in on the running, which is really cute, and she's actually really speedy. So it's been a good mind booster for the kids. It gives them time to be by themselves but still be together and get out some energy, and helps with their mental health, I think. The next thing that went really well for us in the second semester is a 6 weeks on, 1 week off schedule. And I think that's something that I want to continue doing. And Emma and Jack mentioned that they want to continue doing once we start our new homeschool year. And then with that is since January, one of my goals for this year was to have 1 day a week that we are off screens. And that has been really interesting because the parameters for that is even no school related stuff for screens. And it isn't necessarily a full 24-hour screen-free day, because typically our screen-free day is on Fridays, or it has been, and in the evenings after my husband gets home, we typically watch movies. But all during the day, it has been a screen-free day, including screen-free school. And that's been a little bit interesting for Jack and Emma because they do have some online classes, specifically Emma with Spanish and her constitutional literacy, DVD lessons, and math. And the same with Jack for math. And then his main studies is a lot of research that he does on the computer. So thinking ahead to ways to complete some of that work without the computer has been interesting. For math, I print out their math lessons from teaching textbooks. You can just print out the lesson and then they just work on it by hand, which Emma does anyways, and then they'll just enter the answers on the next day. So, and also during that screen-free day, we have a focus on passion projects, but because my kids' passion projects are very tech-based, especially Emma's art and Jack's computer coding, they are instead using, notebooks and drawing by hand and trying to come up with storyboards and ideas of things that they want to create in the digital tools that they use. So it's been interesting to see that as well. We're thinking that potentially next year we may have Wednesday be a screen-free day, so that we're really heavily focused on school Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday, and Wednesday is more of like a break in the middle of the week almost. I'm not sure. I'm still in the planning phases. So the next question is, why did these things go well? And so I had a few reasons. With all of the meetings and lists and monthly reset and all of that stuff, I was able to stay on top of what the kids needed. I feel like communication is a huge part of homeschooling. I always want to be listening to my kids' needs, and that's why I make so many adjustments throughout the year. This year was the first year where I couldn't make some bigger adjustments as far as curriculum. We haven't had any bad curriculum years really, except this year, really. And I think part of that was because we're so used to the Sunlight literature-based learning that when we broke away from that, because Jack had to do main studies, that isn't a Sunlight class at all or level, and then Emma was doing constitutional literacy, government, which is a completely different class than what she is used to for history. It was just not what they expected. And then the science for Emma, the biology, it was just too much. I will talk a little bit more about that when we get to a later question. So constant communication is really good. I'm always listening to my kids. I'm taking notes when they are telling me about different interests that they have. I pay attention when we do our vision boards in January. I'm always asking them what new things they want to learn about, and I am always trying to find ways to incorporate those things. I do make monthly adjustments because I do my monthly reset. I have monthly conferences with the kids to check in with them to see if there are problem areas, if they need new resources. You know, for biology, for instance, Emma was struggling with biology and just the amount of vocabulary and everything in the Apologia Biology program. So once I realized that, I went searching for new tools or videos that she could have. And Apologia does offer a USB drive, which I will talk about again later on, but I didn't know about that when I first ordered the program through Sunlight because that wasn't part of their package, and I wish I had, because I think biology would have been much different if we had started with that USB drive and those little video lessons and the labs on video ahead of time instead of trying to just do it all from the book, because the book is a little bit more confusing. And it may be the third edition. I have heard conflicting reports about the second edition of Apologia Biology versus the third edition. So anyways, then the other big why was because we did that big pivot in the second semester where we stopped doing public school band, and that gave us so much more freedom in our schedule again to do the things that we needed to do and not be burned out and all of that stuff. The next question is, what were the challenges you faced this year? And the first is the entire first semester with band in public school. I really didn't think that it was going to be as challenging as it was, because it was an 80-minute class, 2 or 3 days a week. It was only like 5-10 minutes from us. I didn't think it was going to be that much, but getting my younger two kids in and out of the car twice a day was a challenge. Getting Emma to cross country and then to pep band was a challenge. Getting all of the work done around all of the travel times was really challenging. It was like we would start school at like 8 o'clock, and then by 9:15, we're having to get Emma ready to get in the car to go to band. And then we would bring her to band, and then we would come home and we'd have about 50 minutes before we had to go back and pick her up. Then we'd go back and pick her up, then we'd come home and it'd be 11:30 and I would need to start making lunch. And then it was 12:30 and Emma has essentially done one class for the day. And so she was having to spend from about 1:30 to 6:30 doing school, and when she had cross country, that was 2 to 4. So it was like she had about 3 hours of time to do school, but she was so exhausted from being back and forth that it was not working. And my younger two kids were not a fan of getting in and out of the car every hour of the day to go to the school. They just wanted to stay at home, and it made it hard because we weren't able to do anything else. The kids weren't able to go play tennis because it was during the same time that she had her public school class, her band class, and we weren't able to go to the library because on the days that she wasn't at band, they were incredibly full school days for us because The band days were super light on school. It was a real challenge. Convincing Emma that geometry is important, that's been a real challenge for me this year. And I think it's not the math side. I think I've mentioned this many times, but the theorems and the proofs, I don't know why we need to memorize those. I really don't. I don't see any value in it myself. And so for me to tell Emma that there's value in it, it's very difficult because I'm not being honest if I tell her that, because I don't use that in my life. So there it is. Biology during the first semester without the USB drive was really a challenge, and there was just a lot of vocabulary and burnout during the fall. So those were my big challenges this year, and a lot of those were adjustments that I made in the spring semester. So our spring semester went much better because I was able to make a lot of those adjustments. The USB drive we've had second semester, so biology was a little bit easier to manage. Getting rid of band has been so helpful with our schedule, so we have so much more time to do the things that we want. Why were these challenges? We were too busy. I went back on my yes and no list after I knew that I shouldn't. I don't know why I do it. I really don't. But once the public school kids go back to school, I always feel like, oh, Emma would have so much fun doing this, or Jack would really enjoy this. And so I get caught up in that fear of missing out, I guess, and put them in things that they want to do, but then knowing that they really don't want to do them. It's hard though, because for Emma specifically, she loves music and there is no homeschool music option in our area. So the only way that she can play the saxophone is at the public school. She can write her own music and play the guitar and piano at home and sing at church and all of that stuff, but she can't play in an ensemble. And private lessons, while fun, that's just not the type of environment you really want for learning an instrument like saxophone. But part of the reasons that she wanted to be back in band in the fall was she wanted to do the musical and she wanted to do jazz band. They didn't have jazz band this year because there wasn't enough interest, and the musical practice schedule conflicted with our homeschool schedule, and so she wasn't able to do that. So it was kind of like, why is she doing the band class that she doesn't really care about if she can't do the other things that she really wanted to do? Some subjects we just don't like, me included. And I think that probably me not being more encouraging about geometry was a challenge. I took honors biology in high school and enjoyed that. I do not remember doing the level of vocabulary and the labs that were in this biology text for Apologia. I know that when I was a sophomore and I took honors biology, one of the big projects that we did in our honors biology class was vermicomposting, which is, raising worms. And we created a business and sold worm casings to people. And that was extremely fun for me, creating a business. Now, I have always been entrepreneurial. When I was really little, I would pick grass and lilacs from my yard and make potpourri and put it in Ziploc bags and sell it to the neighbors for 50 cents. People bought it. I sold rocks to people too. They felt bad for me apparently and just would give me money for these things. But running a business, I was the treasurer in this composting business that we had. And I helped with creating packaging and such, and keeping track of all the money and selling everything, which I loved. None of that business and money stuff had anything to do with biology. So I don't know, maybe I should have just had her do a project on worms for biology, because that's what we did. Anyways, some of our core classes were just not as fun as they typically are. I mentioned this already. Main studies, constitutional literacy, they're not our typical history, literature-based history classes from Sunlight. Main studies is a lot of research. Some of the questions were really obscure and difficult to find answers to like on the internet. So that really bothered Jack when he couldn't find answers that he thought should be easy. And even me looking myself, I was like, man, these are some tough questions. The book itself is for 6th through 12th grade, so maybe that's why. Maybe some of the questions are just aimed at an older audience, but yeah, it wasn't as fun as our discussion-based read aloud time that we're used to. Constitutional literacy, Emma liked learning about government, but also it made her really angry. And she just didn't understand some of the decisions and some of the judicial decisions that have come out, and just it's been very interesting, but she was just angry about about some of the things. She had some very definite opinions of how things should work, which I love to see. And when things are not going how she thinks they ought to go, she just, it's angering. But we had a lot of really great discussion about that. But it just wasn't her favorite. And then geometry and biology, I just think they were misses this year. Not that she's not able to do the class, just that it's not as interesting. And so picking geometry this year for math, I wasn't really sure. I know a lot of schools do Algebra 2 after Algebra 1 now, but I just went the traditional route of Algebra 1 geometry, and then next year she'll do Algebra 2. And going into this year, I tried to hold my tongue about not liking geometry and just letting her do teaching textbooks, which she usually does quite well with. And she is doing great with teaching textbooks, and we're not changing that in the future. But just the content itself, she wanted to do math, and she didn't want to just read a bunch of words or do proofs and theorems, which I understand. So I keep saying the same things. Writing this stuff out and seeing themes or patterns within my answers is very helpful to me as I'm thinking about next year. The last, why were these challenges? Just trying to get through because of how busy the fall semester was. So we are kind of just at a point where we want to finish the year, and we're just trying to get through the rest of the stuff. I mean, the English stuff went really well, and we enjoyed that. And actually, we were done pretty much in March with the English and language arts and finishing up that Joy Hakeem history book as well. It's been mainly the subjects that we haven't been a fan of: main studies, biology, and geometry, and math just in general, that has been a little bit more challenging. What do you want to keep for the new homeschool year? Well, I want to keep everything that went well. The Monday meeting and the monthly conferences, our weekly list, the passion project focus is going to be a big part of next year for us, and just figuring out how that's going to work, how I'm going to manage that in our weekly rhythm. That's something that I have to spend a little bit more time with. I do like how we do academics in the morning and passion projects in the afternoon, with more of a passion project focus on that screen-free day. But managing all of the lessons will be a little bit more challenging, especially as Jack goes into level 100, because it's so much more work reading. So we will see how it goes. I think that if we just don't get involved in the fall with public school activities, we would have a much easier time with this. Now, Emma, as of right now, is still planning on doing cross country in the fall. It's a relatively short season, and it doesn't take too much out of our schedules. So I think that it will be okay to continue that, just knowing that it's a short season. And so for that 6 to 8 weeks, maybe we're not as focused on passion projects during those weeks, and we're more academic focused. I think that's probably how it's going to work. I need to wait until I get all of my instructor's guides, which are on back order, that I ordered, before I can figure out what's next. And in fact, I am going to print out the first 3 weeks of all of the instructor's guides that are back ordered, so that I can just at least start reading through the first 3 weeks and have that information in my mind. I like to go through the first 8 weeks before we start school, but I don't think that's going to happen. So we'll see. And then read alouds. I definitely want to incorporate more read alouds, and with the personal development, I want to choose a few new books to read next year with my older two for personal development, because it's been fun, and having them learn some of the skills, the time management skills, time blocking, single tasking versus multitasking, making sure you're doing your most important things first. All of that stuff has been really, really good. And then also with the passion projects as well, making sure that I am in communication with my kids about what their end goal is with the projects, and maybe working on something quarterly, or maybe like if we're doing 6 weeks on, 1 week off, having 1 6-week period to be working on one specific part of a project, or even a whole project, depending what the project is, and making sure that I'm checking in with them regularly so that they're making progress. Because even though they are their passions, I want them to be making progress on these passion projects and not just flitting from one thing to another, or changing direction, or getting bored with one thing and moving on to something else. It's fine if they want to put away a project, but I would like to have more guidelines, I think, and so more communication with the kids about that will be helpful. And then encouraging Lucy, she's going into 3rd grade next year, and so I would like for her to have maybe a couple of things that she works on. It doesn't have to be this long drawn out project, but maybe a couple of skills that she wants to focus on, or something interesting that she wants to learn about that she chooses, rather than just something that I am choosing. That's about when I started with Emma and Jack, giving them, or not giving them ideas, but asking them for ideas on things that they were interested in, and kind of starting down that path of new interest-led learning. Okay, what do you want to get rid of for the new homeschool year? Public school activities, except for cross-country. I think that cross-country is a definite for next year, unless something extreme happens, but no other public school activities, because it is too draining on our schedule. It's not fair to Jack and Lucy to be in this kind of back and forth schedule. Even if Jack stays home and I just have to put Lucy in the car, it's just not fair to them to have so much back and forth time. Another thing that I'd like to get rid of in the new homeschool year is stress about high school. And this kind of just goes back to that chat I had about homeschooling high school and some of my concerns, thinking about the traditional college prep trajectory, thinking about college in general. You know, Emma wants to go to college. She wants to start taking classes at our state college soon, but she's unsure of what classes she wants to take. She doesn't want to just take general education classes. She'd rather take more specialized classes, either in graphic design and art or music, and figuring out how that all works is challenging because, you know, typical college, you have these prerequisites. You have to take a philosophy class, you have to take a math class, you have to take a lab science, you know, and Emma doesn't understand why, if she's paying for something, she can't just take the classes that she wants to take, which it's a good question. So we're trying to figure that out. And I think that book on finding the career that fits you is going to be helpful as we move forward with some of those plans. But I don't want to be stressed about high school. Emma is ahead of where she needs to be for her peer group. She's going into 3rd year high school. If she were in public school, she'd only be going into her sophomore year. So we have a little bit of wiggle room, and I'm not as concerned about that, but just trying to keep myself from stressing is important. The next thing is my expectations about how quickly we can move through things. I need to plan more discussion time because everyone is a talker in this house. We spend a lot of time talking, and I don't want to discourage that discussion time because it's really interesting to me, and I think that my kids learn a lot through discussion. It's kind of why we are literature-based homeschoolers, because we read about the things and then we discuss the things and then we follow the rabbit trails. But I have to remember that I need to include that discussion time. Sometimes I only schedule us for like an hour of read aloud discussion time where I'm reading for 30 to 40 minutes. and then 20 minutes of discussion time is not enough time. So especially because I will read a paragraph and then we'll talk for 15 minutes. I'll read another paragraph, we'll talk for another 15 minutes. So I just need to make sure that I am including enough margin around these discussion topics, these read aloud times where we're sitting around either talking about current events or history or literature or whatever it is. I need to realize that we can't move as quickly as I would like all of the time. And then also, sometimes I have to remember, especially with Lucy being the youngest, I try and move her through things quite quickly. That isn't fair to her sometimes because she shouldn't have to move through things very quickly, whereas I'm just trying to get to the next thing because I've already taught this stuff a couple of times before. So I already know the important parts and I'm just trying to move through it. But every kid is different, and so I have to remember to slow down, especially for Lucy. Was there one subject that you struggled to teach? Why? And the subject for Emma was biology. And I wrote, even though I took honors bio, the sheer amount of info in this course is crazy. It's very wordy. It's not my favorite. It was much better once we got the USB drive and we made significant progress after that. But I didn't know about that USB drive until November, so we were playing catch up a lot. And then the read alouds for Lucy were just okay. We were doing level C this year, and I remember when I did level C with Jack and also with Emma, there were several read alouds that my kids were just not that interested in. They weren't as exciting. Maybe they were for more older kids because their levels do have a range, an age range, and Lucy was on the younger end of the age range, and so was Jack and so was Emma going through this. It wasn't that they didn't understand the material and couldn't answer the questions, but just some of the books that were read alouds weren't interesting, so we just put them aside. And then for Jack, main studies, it was very dry for him. The books that I chose, he liked about half of the history books that I chose. They were literature books, books that were written by Maine authors or books that took place in Maine. So he liked some of them, but not all of them. And then the workbook, it gives all of the information that we need to cover for main studies, but it is kind of dry. And like I said, some of the answers were hard to find. And I think maybe that was because of the wide age range that you use this book with, but it wasn't his favorite. Was there one subject that you excelled teaching? Why? And for me, it's history and English. Those are the two subjects that I love to teach the most and that my kids respond to the most. And I think it's because they all like reading and being read to, and because it's always been a part of our family culture since my kids were infants. I've always read to them. I've always read way more than children's books with them. I think I've mentioned this in a few videos that after about 3 months of reading fairy tales to Emma, when she was about 3 months old, I was so bored with all of the fairy tales and the board books and stuff. I read her Pride and Prejudice and the entire Harry Potter series. And then I was reading Animal, Vegetable, Miracle. I was reading all of my homesteading books to her. Pretty much anything that I was interested in, I would just read to her. And that's kind of how it continued through my other two kids. I stopped reading as much children's literature to them and read what I wanted to read when they were babies. And so it's just been part of our family culture. I know, I'm strange. It is what it is. And why did I feel that I excelled at that? Incorporating discussion books and World Watch for personal development and current events was definitely a huge hit in our homeschool. Creating objectives and steps around passion projects was also incredibly satisfying. Just making sure that we're making progress and having open communication. I think that's just how my kids learn well, and I want to continue to encourage that. What area did your child do the best in? Again, English and math for all three. They all really do well with English and math, which is kind of funny. But I was the same way. In high school, I did really well in English and I did really well in math. I took advanced math through high school and college, and it's just, I'm a math-minded person, but I also really love creative writing, as well as the passion projects and everybody participating in NaNoWriMo. And that was the area that my kids did the best in. And then what area was the biggest challenge for your child? Not you. And that was maintaining balance between what needs to be done and Emma's own wants, working on time management and executive functioning skills. Emma was getting so overwhelmed with the sheer amount of work that she had to complete and all the back and forth in the fall that she would like do 30 minutes of work and then she would go outside and run for an hour because she was just overwhelmed, and that was like her coping mechanism. And so trying to figure out ways for better time management, which obviously cutting back on public school activities in the second semester was a big help with that. So for Jack, it was finding the obscure answers to the main studies questions, and the book selections that I chose for him were not his favorites this year. I've had some trouble choosing books for Jack the past couple of years. He's read almost all of the books that we have for his grade level. And so I'm trying to find new books for him to read, and that's been challenging. And then for Lucy, staying engaged with the history content. Some of the stories were really interesting to her, like all the Robin Hood stuff, and then some of them were just kind of like, I just don't care. I don't have any frame of reference for this stuff. So keeping her engaged with the stories, but the volume 2 of Story of the World is probably my least favorite. I really like the ancient times and I really like the more modern times, so, but that's okay. So those are all of my wrap-up questions. I hope that you find value in this. Obviously, this is just specific to our homeschool year, but then what I do is I take these answers, and you will see you probably would see a lot of themes or patterns within these questions of what is important, what is less important, and maybe a different direction that I want to take, and some of the things that I want to make sure that I include in our new year. This isn't necessarily helping me choose curriculum, because I've already chosen the majority of our curriculum, but it does really help me figuring out with rhythms, making sure that I have the types of resources I need, knowing that for chemistry, if we decide to do chemistry for Emma next year, she really needs to have video-based curriculum associated with a book. She doesn't just want to read a book, a textbook. The same thing with Jack. He really excels with project-based science. So is there some sort of project-based science similar to Science Unlocked that we did this year, or do we choose more Science Unlocked kits for next year, or do we go with physical science, which is freshman level science curriculum? So, and is there a project-based physical science curriculum? Probably there is, I just haven't found one yet. But anyways, so I hope that this was helpful to you. If you have questions about anything that I talked about, definitely leave them in the comments. And if you want to print out this for your own purposes, I will leave a link in the description box, and you can grab that and print it out and do your own wrap-up questions. So again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks, guys. Bye.